The words cut through me like glass. Ruth, today will be your last day. I sat in the sleek conference room staring at Dominic Hayes, the new managing partner, who had been with the firm for barely 8 months, while I felt my entire life's work collapse beneath me. 25 years gone, discarded in 10 minutes, with a manila folder slid across the polished table, like I was nothing more than a line item in his quarterly projections. Business decisions aren't personal, he said with that practiced corporate smile that never reached his eyes. HR was already there, reciting platitudes about severance packages, continuation of benefits, the necessary downside of restructuring. I barely heard them. All I could think was how I had given this firm everything: my time, my loyalty, my identity, and they were pushing me out as though I were nothing but legacy fat. His words, not mine. At 58, I was the oldest employee in client relations. My salary reflected years of experience, years of building Franklin & Associates into one of Boston's premier consulting firms. I was there when we had only 17 clients, when Arthur Franklin himself was still a hungry visionary who believed relationships mattered more than billable hours. And I was still there when we grew into an industry leader, a place where my clients didn't just sign contracts, they trusted me with their futures. And now I was nothing. Security escorted me out. A humiliation I had helped design myself years earlier, when we created that protocol to protect the firm from risk. Now I was the risk, walking past colleagues who avoided my eyes, my box of belongings in my arms, photos with clients, thank you notes, the crystal paperweight Arthur had given me on my 20th anniversary. All of it crammed into cardboard as if 25 years could be reduced to clutter. My phone buzzed as I left the building. A text from Catherine Winters, CEO of our largest client, Ruth, hearing troubling rumors. Call me ASAP. I looked back and saw Dominic already on the phone spinning his version of damage control. He didn't understand. None of them did. You don't replace trust with a memo. You don't reassign relationships like files in a cabinet. I had been the bridge between this firm and the people who built its fortune, and they had just set fire to that bridge. That night I sat in my apartment surrounded by silence, staring at job boards, unread messages piling up on my phone. My LinkedIn had never been so popular. People love watching a downfall they didn't have to live through. I should have felt panic. Instead, I felt numbness, and beneath it something darker: betrayal. Then the phone rang. Arthur's voice. The man who had hired me all those years ago. Ruth, he said, his British accent tight. This wasn't authorized by me. I was overseas. They pushed it through while I was gone. His words should have comforted me, but they didn't. Because even if he hadn't signed the paper, he hadn't protected me either. 25 years, Arthur Rouse whispered. And I deserved better than a 10-minute meeting and a security escort. There was silence on the other end, heavy and guilt-ridden. He offered to bring me back to fix the misunderstanding. But I knew it wasn't that simple. Once you've been labeled dispensable, once you've been cut out, there's no going back. Not really. I hung up the phone and stared into the dark. My career was supposed to end with dignity, with a retirement dinner, a gold watch, speeches about loyalty. Instead, it ended with a shove out the door and whispers of cost-cutting. But what Dominic didn't know, what none of them knew, was that loyalty works both ways. Clients remember who stood by them, who called them back at midnight, who cared about more than the billable hours. And those clients were already calling me. I hadn't planned revenge. I hadn't needed to. They had planted the seeds themselves. And now those seeds were starting to grow. Catherine didn't bother with pleasantries. Is it true, she demanded the moment I returned her call. They let you go. I could hear the hum of her office phones, the faint clink of a coffee mug, the controlled chaos of a CEO's morning. It is, I said. The word tasted like metal. Yesterday. A beat of silence, then a low whistle. 25 years and they didn't even have the decency to loop me in. What are they thinking? She didn't wait for my answer. Cancel tomorrow's quarterly review. I'm not driving 2 hours to be handled by someone who just learned my company's name. You don't have to cancel, I said. Let them make their pitch. You should see what your account means to them now. The edge in my voice surprised us both. I'll send you my notes with your permission. You always have it, she replied. Her voice softened. Ruth, you built this relationship. Not Dominic. If you land somewhere, you call me. I hung up and sat in the quiet that follows relief, that strange aftertaste of being believed. My inbox pinged. Another subject line, saw the news. Are you okay? Then another. Please tell me this is a rumor. The messages came from CFOs and founders, from people whose kids' birthdays I remembered, whose hands I'd held when markets turned cruel. They signed their names warmly. We trust you. Where you go, we'll go. I didn't reply right away. A lifetime of loyalty doesn't turn into poaching overnight. Also, there was the little matter of the non-compete I'd signed a decade ago, a relic from a different era, before anyone imagined we'd try to codify friendship. I dug the PDF out of an old email, my stomach clenching as I read the language, a net cast wide enough to choke the sea. But tucked inside the boilerplate was a clause about good faith and fair dealing, about the firm's obligation to act with integrity toward long-standing employees. Dominic's smirk floated back to me. Integrity. The text came from a number I didn't recognize. Check your personal email, a friend in admin. I opened my laptop and found a single forwarded message from an internal address time-stamped 2 days before I was fired. The subject line made my vision swim: legacy fat removal Q3 targets. Dominic's email was surgical in its contempt. Bullet points on margin leakage, a spreadsheet of senior salaries with commentary like warm body relationship holder, non-scaling, and beside my name, sentiment risk. Replace with automated outreach, plus junior. Sentiment risk. The thing he meant as insult was the heart of our success. Feelings, memory, care. I pressed a fist against my chest until the ache steadied. I forwarded the message to my lawyer and then just sat. The humiliation had veins and they ran everywhere. The 12-hour Sundays, the hospital bedside calls when a client's spouse was ill, the time I drove through a snowstorm to show up at a factory gate before a strike. The birthdays I missed with my own family, so I could be present for someone else's. I could hear my father's voice from decades ago, deep and certain, over a pot of Sunday stew. You don't leave people just because it's cheaper. He'd been a union steward at the shipyard, hands like Riverstone's, knuckles always dinged. He died the year the yard closed, the work sent elsewhere to save a few cents on a rivet. I'd built a life determined to prove loyalty could still win against the math. And here I was again, thrown out by a spreadsheet. Before noon, 3 more clients had called. 2 canceled their upcoming reviews until we understand what's going on. The third, the family-owned manufacturer I'd shepherded through 2 recessions, said flatly, "We're closing our account. Tell me where you land." I didn't ask them to reconsider. I didn't ask them for anything. I only thanked them for their trust, and repeated a simple truth: I won't disappear on you. By evening I had a plan, the kind that begins like a prayer and hardens into a blueprint. Not revenge, at least not the petty kind. Something cleaner. I called an old friend from compliance, the one who'd left the firm years ago, when the numbers started mattering more than the names. "I want to start something small," I told her. "Quiet. A place where sentiment risk is what we protect, not purge." She laughed, a sound like a window unlatched. "You finally mean it." "I finally mean it," I said, "but I won't solicit. They'll have to find me." We workshopped a name that felt like home and harbor both. I used my savings, every practical, careful dollar I'd tucked away, while others bought second homes and third cars. I rented a single sunny room above a florist, the air always touched by eucalyptus and patience. I bought a second-hand desk and set the old crystal paperweight at its center. On day 1, I opened a clean notebook and wrote 3 lines. "Call everyone back. Tell them the truth. Keep the bridge open." 2 days later, Catherine called again, voice colder than winter glass. "They sent a junior, who pitched me a dashboard," she said. "A dashboard, Ruth. He didn't know that my son is launching a new division, or that our European distributor is late on payment because their CEO had a stroke. He didn't even ask." She drew a breath. "We're terminating. Effective immediately." I closed my eyes. Not triumph, something heavier. You can't cheer while watching a house you helped build burn. That evening, as I was closing up the office, a shadow crossed the frosted glass. The door opened and in walked someone I didn't expect: Arthur. The years had drawn his face down, but his eyes were the same, earnest, searching. He glanced around the little room, the single fern, the thrifted lamp. And somehow it all shamed him more than any courtroom might. "I wanted to see you," he said, voice rough, "to apologize properly." I leaned against the desk, palms flat, letting the silence make room for the truth. "Dominic promised growth," he went on. "He told the board we were sentimental. He said relationships don't scale." He met my gaze. "I forgot what we were, what you made us." A long buried story stirred at the edges of my mind. The night Arthur and I drove 4 hours to sit with a client whose warehouse had burned to the ground. He'd insisted on being there, jacket draped over a shivering foreman's shoulders, as dawn broke. That was the firm I'd given myself to. A memory like a lighthouse you only see when the fog thins. "Why are you here, Arthur?" I asked. "Because the phones won't stop," he said simply. "Because 70% of the clients you handled have either paused or pulled out. Because the board is in open revolt. And because..." He exhaled. "Because I found an email." I didn't make him specify which one, so did I. He nodded, shame flickering across his features. It wasn't just numbers. He wanted to erase the culture and backfill it with code. He swallowed. "I need your help." Something inside me cracked and then aligned like a bone set right. The girl who'd learned to be indispensable had become the woman who'd learned to be free. I could help. I could also walk away. Both choices were finally mine. Outside, the florist was packing buckets, petals scattered like confetti in the gutter. I thought of my father again, of rivets and promises, of the quiet dignity of showing up. "If I help," I said at last, "it won't be for the firm. It will be for the clients. And it will be on my terms." Arthur's relief was almost boyish. "Of course." I held up a hand. "I'm not coming back." His face fell, but I continued. "I'll build something alongside them. Beside you, if you can remember who we were. But I won't be anyone's legacy fat again." He closed his eyes, nodded once, and when he opened them they were wet. "Understood." When he left, I locked the door and stood in the quiet hum of my small office, the streetlight turning the window gold. My phone vibrated on the desk, another message from a client asking where to send paperwork. The grief was still there, braided tightly with the resolve. Betrayal had pried my fingers off a past I would have clung to forever. And somehow in the letting go, a future made room to enter. The weeks that followed felt like living 2 lives at once. By day I was knee-deep in logistics, filing incorporation paperwork, drafting service agreements, scouring Craigslist for gently used office chairs. By night I was fielding calls from clients, voices lined with equal parts fury and relief, fury at the way they'd been treated by Dominic's regime, relief that I was still here, still steady, still remembering the names of their children and the anniversaries of their founding dates. Every call carried the same refrain: "Where you go, we'll go." It humbled me. It terrified me. It lit something inside me I hadn't felt in years. A fire not fueled by loyalty to a firm's name on a door, but by loyalty to the people who trusted me with their livelihoods. Dominic, of course, wasn't silent. Word got back to me through colleagues that he was furious, calling me a parasite, threatening legal action. He couldn't comprehend that clients weren't commodities to be reassigned, that the moment he cut me loose, he severed the very ties holding them close. My lawyer, a shrewd woman named Carla, with steel-gray hair and a voice like tempered glass, reviewed the non-compete with me line by line. She smiled when we reached the good faith clause. "They broke faith first," she said simply. "Let them try. A courtroom loves loyalty stories. And you, Ruth, are the embodiment of loyalty." Her confidence steadied me, but the storm still raged. I heard Dominic had doubled down, telling the board he'd replace 70% of lost revenue within 6 months through automation and aggressive sales tactics. He bragged about AI dashboards and overseas call centers, about trimming legacy sentiment until the firm was future-proof. But clients aren't numbers, they're people. And people don't stay where they feel disposable. One evening, Catherine invited me to dinner at her home. Her husband grilled salmon in the backyard while she poured me a glass of wine. "I don't just want you as my consultant," she said, looking me dead in the eye. "I want you on my board." I nearly choked. "Your board?" She nodded. "Your instincts, your loyalty, that's what companies like mine survive on. I don't trust Dominic's firm to last the year. But you, Ruth, you're the future. You don't see it yet, but I do." Her words cracked me open. For decades I'd been told I was valuable only insofar as I could keep clients happy under someone else's banner. Now here was Catherine telling me I was the banner. As summer deepened, more accounts migrated, sometimes with ceremony formal letters of termination sent to Franklin and Associates CC'd to me. Sometimes quietly late-night texts whispered confirmations that contracts had been cut. Each time my heart ached with a mix of sorrow and vindication. I hadn't wanted this collapse, but Dominic had sown it with his arrogance. I was simply the witness and unintentionally the alternative. Then one afternoon Arthur showed up again. He looked older than the last time, the weight of the firm's unraveling etched into the lines around his eyes. He sat across from me in my little office, glancing at the fern in the corner, the cheap rug, the paperweight gleaming on my desk. "They're calling an emergency board meeting," he said quietly. "Dominic's projections have fallen apart. The clients aren't coming back. They want me to take over interim leadership." I folded my hands, waiting. "I want you with me," he said. "Not at Franklin and Associates. At the table. Help me rebuild it into what it was meant to be. We'll start fresh with you as partner." The word hit me like a tidal wave. Partner. For 25 years I'd been everything but. A trusted lieutenant. A silent backbone. But never equal. I searched his face looking for sincerity. What I saw wasn't just guilt, it was a plea for redemption. And maybe a recognition that he'd been complicit too, letting Dominic's poison take root while he was away. "I'll think about it," I said finally. That night I walked home under a velvet sky, the air thick with honeysuckle impossibility. The old Ruth, the one who would have jumped at the offer for the sake of security, was gone. The new Ruth knew her worth, wasn't tethered to anyone's table. She could build her own, and maybe, just maybe, that was the sweetest justice of all. Autumn came crisp and sharp, and with it the sound of collapse echoing from the marble halls I once called home. Franklin and Associates had been my life for 25 years, and now it was unraveling in the business press like a scandalous obituary. Headlines whispered of client flight board unrest and management missteps. I didn't need the articles to tell me the truth. I could hear it in the frantic voicemails Dominic left for clients, in the quiet thank you notes slipping into my inbox from former colleagues who were finally ready to jump ship. Arthur called again, this time, his voice steadier, almost resigned. "They're pushing Dominic out," he said. "The board is fractured. Half want to save what's left, half want to dismantle it entirely. They keep asking me, what does Ruth want?" The question stunned me. For decades what Ruth wanted had never been asked, only what she could deliver, what she could sacrifice. And now the ashes of that neglect had somehow made me the deciding voice. I didn't answer Arthur right away. Instead I met with Catherine again, this time in her office. She leaned forward across the polished desk. "You don't owe them a resurrection. If you build your own house, Ruth will fill it. All of us who followed you will stay." Her words echoed in my chest all night. Build my own house. Not patch up someone else's ruins. Not fight battles on ground poisoned with betrayal, but step into the terrifying, exhilarating unknown of creating something wholly mine. 2 weeks later the decision made itself. An envelope arrived at my apartment, a legal threat from Franklin and Associates, claiming I was violating my non-compete, poaching clients. I laughed when I read it, not out of humor but out of clarity. Dominic was gone, but his rot lingered, and the firm was still clinging to the idea that loyalty could be owned on paper. I forwarded the letter to Carla, my lawyer. Within an hour she replied with a draft of our response. It was sharp, clean, devastating in its simplicity. "Our client has abided by all contractual obligations. Clients have made independent choices, citing lack of faith in your management. We suggest you redirect your energy to salvaging your remaining accounts, rather than harassing a woman you discarded without cause." Reading it I felt taller, lighter, free. That week I signed the lease on a larger office space, a suite with 4 rooms and windows that poured in light. I hired 2 former colleagues who had walked away from Franklin after my firing, their loyalty, not to the name on the letterhead, but to the culture we once believed in. Together, we painted the walls, unpacked second-hand furniture, laughed until our throats hurt as we imagined what Dominic would say if he saw us now. Clients arrived carrying contracts, not just promises. Catherine's company moved their entire account. The family manufacturer came next. Within months we had a roster that mirrored what I once managed alone, except now it was ours, built on trust. No one could fire, no one could replace. And yet, I couldn't shake the ghost of Franklin and Associates. One evening Arthur appeared at my new office, standing awkwardly in the doorway. "They'll dissolve within the year," he said quietly. "Dominic's gone, but the damage is done. I wanted you to know. I regret letting it get this far." I looked at him. Really looked. For years he had been the man I respected most, the one whose vision gave me purpose. Now he was just a tired figure clinging to the ruins of what once was. I softened, but I didn't waver. "You taught me loyalty," I said gently. "But you also taught me that loyalty without respect is just servitude." "I won't go back, Arthur. I can't." His shoulders sagged, but there was something like relief in his eyes too, maybe because I had given him the truth he couldn't give himself. He left quietly, and I knew that chapter was finally closed. The night after, I stood alone in my new office, city lights glittering outside, the hum of computers, and the faint smell of fresh paint around me. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was clinging to someone else's legacy. I felt like I was writing my own, and that, I realized, was the truest revenge, not their downfall, but my rising. Winter settled over the city, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and tests your resolve. But inside my new office, there was warmth of laughter, of late-night brainstorming, of people who believed in building something different. Every morning when I unlocked the glass door, with our new name stenciled across it, I felt a quiet pride I had never known in 25 years at Franklin and Associates. Clients kept coming. Some arrived with contracts in hand, others with nothing but trust in their eyes. They didn't just want consulting, they wanted connection, someone who would remember their humanity when numbers turned brutal. Each time I sat across from them, I thought of Dominic's email sentiment, risk, and smiled. What he called a liability was in truth the foundation of everything. News of Franklin's decline spread fast. By spring, the firm was a hollow shell, departments gutted, long-time employees fleeing to safer ground. Headlines that once celebrated their growth now chronicled their collapse. I read them without bitterness, only a sense of inevitability. They had tried to erase loyalty from the equation, and the equation had erased them. One evening, Catherine hosted a dinner in my honor. Around her table sat people I had once served under Franklin's banner, now gathered, not for the firm but for me. They toasted my perseverance, my refusal to disappear. I felt my throat tighten as I raised my own glass. To loyalty, I said, not as a slogan but as a way of life. Glasses clinked, and for the first time I felt the fullness of what I had gained, not just a career but a community. Yet beneath the celebration lingered the quiet ache of what I had lost. 25 years is not erased without scars. Sometimes when I passed Franklin's old building, I would feel the weight of all those years, the version of me who had believed she belonged there. I honored her, but I no longer mourned her. Because without her loyalty, without her heartbreak, I would not be standing here. As months turned into a year, I realized the true climax of my story wasn't Dominic's downfall or Franklin's collapse. It was the night I looked around my bustling office, filled with people who chose to be here, filled with clients who trusted us, not because of a name, but because of a promise, and I whispered to myself, I made this. Revenge had never been the plan. But justice found its way quietly and irrevocably. And in the end, what mattered most wasn't that they failed. It was that I endured. I rose. I built something they could never take away. So if you're listening to my story, and you've ever felt discarded, betrayed, or made to believe you were replaceable, remember this: your worth is not defined by the hands that let you go. Sometimes being pushed out is the very thing that pushes you into your true power. If my story touched you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, subscribe for more heartfelt stories, and leave a comment with your own experience, because every ending can be the beginning of something you never imagined.